Late evening settles over the courthouse parking lot, a strange mix of silence and fluorescent streetlights cutting harsh shadows across the wet pavement. If this story touched your ear, I make stories like this every week. Subscribe, I would love to have you with me. Daniel Miller stands alone, gripping a stack of divorce papers that suddenly weigh more than his whole body. The clerk inside had congratulated his wife for reclaiming her identity, calling it inspiring, but none of this feels inspiring to him. Wind rustles, lifting the corners of the documents, and Daniel's fingers tremble so badly he can barely keep hold. He thought he was here to support Amy's personal journey, her need to be independent, her mission to escape patriarchal family expectations. He believed her, because for 11 years he always did. But now, standing with those papers in his hands, he feels something is terribly wrong. His heartbeat grows louder in his ears than the rain around him, and he suddenly fears he's been living in a lie. Daniel unlocks his truck and sinks into the driver's seat, the leather cold, the cabin too quiet. He opens his phone, just to distract himself for a moment, but instead, the screen hits him like a punch to the ribs. A photo he's never seen before fills the display, Amy smiling brightly, dressed the same way she was at the courthouse earlier, standing beside a man Daniel has never met. The caption, "Finally reclaiming my name, for us." The man's arm is wrapped around her waist, champagne glasses in their hands, celebration in their eyes. Daniel scrolls down with a trembling thumb and sees comments cheering for their new chapter, congratulating the power couple finally becoming public. His lungs burn. Tears blur the screen. The name change wasn't about independence. She didn't want freedom from marriage, she wanted freedom from him. The divorce papers slip from Daniel's lap and scatter onto the truck floor. He doesn't move. He just stares forward, jaw clenched so tightly it hurts, but his body feels numb and weak at the same time. Rain begins to tap harder against the windshield, streaking down like shattered glass. The echo of the courthouse door closing somewhere behind him feels like a clock striking the end of his life as he knew it. Memory flashes hit him like lightning, the conversation last month, Amy holding his hands, insisting she needed space, claiming she wanted to find herself and rebuild her identity. Lies disguised as empowerment. The realization is suffocating. A police siren wails in the distance, but Daniel barely hears it. His voice comes out as a whisper, broken and small, so independence was just a new beginning with him. And in that moment, his world collapses. Daniel and Amy met during their college years, when life was raw, simple, and full of borrowed dreams. Daniel worked 2 part-time jobs, campus maintenance at dawn and stocking shelves at a grocery store at night, to help pay their tuition and rent. Amy had big ambitions and a natural talent for storytelling. Daniel never once complained about the sacrifices because he believed in her more than he believed in himself. When she graduated and he proudly introduced her as Mrs. Miller, he felt like he had finally built the family he never had. Growing up with a father who walked out and never looked back, Daniel carried scars of abandonment silently. Loving Amy, building a life with her, was proof he was not unwanted. He thought marriage meant belonging, safety, a home. He never imagined the name Miller would one day become something she wanted to escape from. Amy's upbringing shaped her differently. Her mother constantly reminded her to marry up, to find stability in a man rather than chase risks or passion. Amy hated being defined, first as a student expected to impress relatives, then as a fiancée expected to plan the perfect wedding, and later as a wife expected to settle into domestic predictability. When her journalism career finally took off and she was hired by a trendy digital magazine, something shifted inside her. She became surrounded by glamorous people, rooftop interviews, industry events, influencers, a world Daniel never belonged to. It wasn't that she stopped loving him immediately, she simply began loving the new version of herself more. Her social circle praised reinvention and self-branding. Suddenly, the title, Mrs. Miller, felt heavy to her, like proof she was still someone's daughter, someone's wife, never fully her own person. Daniel didn't notice the distance at first, he mistook it for stress and exhaustion from Amy's demanding new job. But slowly, the signs appeared. She stayed longer at work, stopped inviting him to industry events, started speaking about individuality and self-love like they were walls built between them. Then came the argument about the last name. Daniel sat at the dining table, hands curled around a mug, trying to stay calm as Amy stood across from him, insisting that being called Mrs. Miller erased her identity. For Daniel, the name symbolized unity, proof he finally belonged to a family that wouldn't leave. For Amy, it symbolized ownership and limitation. The pain wasn't in disagreement, it was that both of them spoke from old wounds the other couldn't see. After that conversation, nothing felt the same. Something invisible broke, and neither one knew how to fix it. The moment seemed innocent at first, Amy placing a stack of documents on the dining table and asking Daniel to sign them while making coffee. She spoke softly, almost rehearsed, explaining that she wanted to legally return to her maiden name as a statement of feminism and independence, insisting repeatedly that it wasn't a rejection of the marriage. Daniel sat quietly, throat tight, trying not to show the sting he felt. He had spent years loving the unity behind their shared name, but he didn't want to become a roadblock to her growth. When she told him that true love should never limit identity, he nodded and forced a small smile, pushing his pain down. He signed the papers slowly, trusting her, believing that marriage meant supporting each other even when it hurt. As she hugged him afterward, he felt strangely hollow, but he told himself love was supposed to require sacrifice. A week later, Daniel found himself standing under glittering chandeliers at an upscale media gala, wearing the one suit he owned, determined to support Amy's big night. Cameras flashed, laughter echoed, and stylish guests swirled past with cocktails and confidence. At first Daniel felt proud watching Amy effortlessly navigate conversations, until the moment everything shifted. A man Daniel didn't know placed his hand on Amy's lower back, and people around them greeted him as if he was her partner. Amy didn't correct them. She introduced him to others as a dear friend, not her husband. The words hit like a blade disguised as courtesy. Daniel stood still, holding a champagne glass he never drank from, smiling mechanically while pain hollowed his chest. Every time Amy laughed at something the other man said, Daniel felt himself disappear a little more, until he was just a ghost in her new world. The car ride home was silent until it exploded. Daniel finally whispered, "Why didn't you tell people I was your husband?" And Amy snapped back defensively, accusing him of insecurity and suffocating expectations. They went back and forth, his voice low and wounded, hers sharp and tired, each speaking from pain rather than truth. She insisted she wanted to be seen for her career, not as someone's wife, and he insisted he only wanted acknowledgement, not ownership. But beneath the argument was something darker, an emotional distance Amy wasn't trying to hide anymore. Later that night, after she fell asleep, Daniel sat alone on the edge of the bed scrolling through her social media, and froze. The same night he had signed her name change papers, she had posted a photo celebrating with another man, champagne in hand. Independence wasn't her new beginning. Amy packed her bags under the soft excuse of needing space to figure out who she is, and Daniel let her go because he was raised to believe you don't cage the people you love. But within days, he learned the truth from someone else. She hadn't moved into an apartment alone, she had moved straight into Evan Carter's luxury loft, her editor, her boyfriend, the man from the gala. Word spread fast through her new circle. Daniel was the traditional, boring husband who couldn't keep up. At parties, they laughed about him. The man who sacrificed while she climbed, the man still calling her my wife while she called him a phase. And then the papers arrived, Amy filing for divorce and demanding half the house, claiming she emotionally supported his life. Daniel stared at the documents in disbelief, realizing love wasn't just gone, he was being erased and punished for loving her. Rock bottom didn't arrive all at once, it leaked in slowly, night after night. Daniel stopped sleeping, replaying moments in his head until sunrise. His appetite vanished, meals went untouched, coffee replaced food. At work, he forgot instructions, lost focus, and snapped at coworkers who asked if he was okay. Friends gave up checking in when he didn't respond, and the world shrank to the inside of his silent house, a house that suddenly felt too big for one person. The only voice that broke through the fog was his sister, Laura. She called daily, refusing to let him drown quietly. She told him hard truths, that Amy had manipulated him, twisted empowerment into guilt, and gaslight him to feel like the bad guy for wanting love. Laura didn't flatter him, she reminded him he wasn't weak, he was betrayed. And slowly, Daniel started believing her. When Daniel finally met with a lawyer, he expected pity, but instead he was met with strategy. The lawyer flipped through the divorce demands with an arched brow and said firmly, "If she wants to take everything you built, you don't just defend, you fight." Something in Daniel woke up. For the first time, instead of grieving, he felt a pulse of determination. He gathered bank statements, transaction histories showing Amy's secret hotel stays, timelines matching empowerment events to weekends with Evan, and messages where she used feminist language as camouflage for infidelity. The narrative she sold publicly, independence, reinvention, finding herself, was a polished mask for betrayal and financial leverage. Sitting in his home office surrounded by evidence, Daniel realized this wasn't only about heartbreak anymore. It was about dignity. She didn't just cheat on him, she tried to destroy him. And he was done being quiet. The courtroom was packed, lawyers, observers, reporters, and curious strangers waiting for entertainment disguised as justice. Amy walked in like a celebrity entering a premiere, arm in arm with Evan, chin high, smile polished. She spoke confidently when the judge asked her to explain her petition, delivering a dramatic speech about breaking free from patriarchy, claiming she had been forced into domestic servitude and identity erasure. Heads nodded, some applauded quietly, and Amy absorbed the validation like applause she'd been craving her whole life. Daniel sat very still at the table beside his lawyer, eyes lowered, letting her talk. Not once did he interrupt. Not once did he react. His silence infuriated Amy. She wanted him to break, to look weak, to justify her narrative. She kept speaking with theatrical emotion, certain she was moments away from legally stripping him of everything: money, house, reputation, dignity. Then Daniel's lawyer stood. No speech, no theatrics, just a file dropped onto the desk with a heavy thud. He began presenting evidence one piece at a time. Hotel receipts from nights Amy claimed she was on empowerment retreats. Emails between Amy and Evan planning weekends together during business trips. Photos from the gala night, the same night Daniel signed her name change form, with captions celebrating their new chapter, champagne in hand. Finally, texts from Amy to a friend bragging, "He'll sign anything, I'm getting the house." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Evan's smirk vanished. The judge's expression hardened. Amy's face went gray. She reached for a moral defense that no longer existed. Her grand narrative of oppression collapsed in seconds, not from anger, but from truth. Every empowerment post, every speech of independence, every feminist slogan had been a costume hiding infidelity and greed. Everyone expected Daniel to rise, shout, demand restitution, drag Amy through the fire she set. But instead, he stood slowly, hands steady for the first time in months, and said only one sentence: "I'm not here to take anything from her, I just want to be free." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Amy's composure shattered instantly, because if she wasn't a victim, she had nothing. If she wasn't being oppressed, she had no story. If Daniel wasn't fighting, she couldn't play the wounded heroine. She tried to speak, to cry, to reclaim the narrative, but no one was listening. Even Evan stepped away from her bench. For the first time in the entire relationship, Daniel wasn't the one begging. He wasn't losing anything, he was letting go. That was the moment Amy realized she didn't just lose the case, she lost the power she had built her identity on. The house that once echoed with silence and heartbreak gradually transformed into something new, not because Daniel forgot the pain, but because he chose to grow around it. One Saturday morning, instead of lying in bed replaying old memories, he picked up the toolbox his father left him years ago. He cleared out the unused guest room, tore down a wall, scrubbed dust off the concrete floor, and started converting it into a woodworking studio, something he'd always dreamed of but never pursued because he was too busy supporting Amy's ambitions. The sound of sanders, drills, and saws replaced the sound of grief. The first chair he made wasn't perfect, but it felt like breathing after months underwater. For the first time in a long time, Daniel wasn't living to earn love, he was building something for himself. The studio slowly filled with the smell of cedar and oak and the warmth of finished projects. Daniel began taking pictures of his handcrafted chairs, tables, and cabinets and posted them online without expecting anything. Orders began trickling in, then multiplying. His hands, once shaking from heartbreak, now moved with skilled purpose. Nights became quiet not because he was numb, but because he slept again. He gained weight back, his eyes stopped looking tired, and coworkers stopped tiptoeing around him. Therapy helped him understand that his fear of abandonment wasn't a flaw, it came from being a child who learned to love too hard because he was afraid love might leave. He realized vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was proof he had a heart capable of deep connection. For the first time, confidence wasn't borrowed from someone else, it was his point. One afternoon, a customer named Emma visited to pick up a custom wooden bookshelf. She didn't flirt, didn't pry, didn't fill silence with assumptions, she simply admired the craft, asking curious questions about the grain, the joints, the polish. She returned weeks later for another order, then another. Their conversation stayed gentle and simple, no heavy confessions, no emotional rush. She praised his skill, and he didn't shrink away from the compliment this time. They laughed sometimes, nothing forced, nothing urgent. Healing wasn't a dramatic moment, it was a slow, steady softening. Daniel didn't see her as a future partner, just a human connection that didn't hurt. And in that space, he learned something powerful: closure doesn't come when the past apologizes, it comes when the present feels safe. He wasn't in love again. But he was living again, and that was enough. Amy arrived quietly, not like the triumphant woman who once walked into a courtroom with applause in her eyes, but like someone who had run out of places to belong. Daniel was sanding a table when he looked up and saw her standing in the doorway of the workshop, makeup smudged, clothes elegant but tired. She tried to smile, to soften her presence, but her voice trembled as she asked if they could talk. She told him Evan left months ago, her career was on pause, people turned against her, and nothing in her life made sense anymore. For the first time in years, she admitted she had been wrong, that she confused ambition with selfishness, empowerment with entitlement, and validation with love. Amy reminisced about college, about the life they built, about the man who stood by her when no one else did. Then, she cried, and begged for another chance. There was a long silence, the kind that held years of memory, pain, and what-ifs. For a moment, Daniel felt the familiar sting in his chest, the old instinct to comfort her, to fix things, to hold on. But something inside him had changed. He wasn't numb, he was healed. The pain didn't control him anymore. He told her quietly that he once would have given everything to hear her apologize, but life had already happened, lessons already learned. Then he said words that were soft but final, the kind that didn't need volume to hit hard. You didn't lose me because you found someone better. You lost me because you couldn't recognize what you already had. Amy crumbled. She sobbed not because he hated her, but because he didn't. She reached for him, but he didn't move. He simply walked her to the door, not cruel, just finished. The workshop felt still after she left, not empty, but peaceful. Daniel returned to the workbench and picked up the wooden sign he had been carving throughout the week. He traced the engraved letters with care, Miller & Son, built to last. It wasn't just a business name, it was a promise to himself, a legacy, a future not defined by abandonment. He hung the sign above the entrance, wiped sawdust from his palms, and leaned back to look at what he had created, not out of heartbreak, but out of growth. The quiet felt different now. It wasn't silence from loss, it was the sound of a life he rebuilt with his own hands. Daniel smiled, not because someone chose him, or begged for him, or validated him, but because he finally chose himself. And that was the kind of love that never left.